going to talk about how some people never really get where they want to go. They never achieve what they want to achieve, and why that often happens. Now, I know it's a cliche saying, but I read a book and it changed my life. And I mean, it really did change me completely, this book. It was a self-help book. And if you're one of the ones who go, self-help books are hopeless, Anthony Robbins and all that stuff, it's all bullshit, blah, 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 well, you're likely to be one of these people that doesn't bloody well get anywhere. One of the things this book said, and I've seen this over and over in real life since, is that there's all these people that think they're going to get their big break, their big shot and all this stuff. But they miss one major point. Nothing in their life that they do today is any different from how they've done it yesterday. They do things a certain way and they get a certain result. They're that stupid that they think that they can continue to do things the exact same way and somehow get some miraculous over-the-top result that's going to make them a millionaire tomorrow. And some people have that happen. It's called lottery. But most people don't. And there's a pretty simple thing. If you want things to change, if you want the results you get to change, you've got to change the way you do things. And often it starts with changing the way you view things, your attitudes and stuff like that. So many people are stuck in a comfort zone. They won't want to move out of the comfort zone, this and that. Last time I was on welfare, which was 2009, there was a job agency that the welfare office obviously got me to go to as part of the dealio of continuing to get paid. Anyway, at that office, just reloading the fire here a bit. At that office, the woman there said to me, "Are you happy to walk around and hand resumes out to businesses?" And I said, "Oh yeah, no worries. You don't get nervous by it and nothing?" I said, "No, not at all." I said, "Actually, I had my own business for a while, and I don't bat an eyelid. And even before I had my business, I'd go around and do it. I'd have to maybe get a bit worked up prior to when I had my business, and just say, okay, we've got to do it, and just do it." But she told me that there's a massive amount of people that will only send out letters and make phone calls, and there's even more people who will never even make phone calls. They will just send letters because they're too shit scared to go and face anyone in a workplace. And I said, "That's not a problem for me." And she said, "Oh, so many people it is." Like, she was talking like as though it was 80% of people wouldn't do it. I was a bit surprised. So how the hell do these people think they're going to get anywhere if they don't even have the balls to come up to someone and say, "Here's my resume, I would like a job, I've sort of done a bit of what your business does, or, I haven't, but I'd like to give it a shot, or I've done something in an industry and I believe there's skills that can cross over between, this and that, or I've spent a lot of time on a forklift driving a truck or doing something else that may be useful in your business." They don't have the balls to do that. Furthermore, there's so many people that don't have the balls to be an entrepreneur or anything like that. And you get all these people, "Oh, when my big break comes, flaming hell, Jesus would have returned before your big break comes, buddy." You've got to step out, and you've got to change the way you do things if you want to have a shot at getting anywhere. And it's simple as that. There's another one I see, and I see this a lot in city people, especially ones who worry about their ego and their status. I see it really badly. And that is, and this book also had it mention this as well, they can't sacrifice anything take one step backwards in standard of living, in luxuries. They can't skimp on anything. They can't, buy the cheapo generic biscuits for a few weeks. They have got to always have an increasing level of living standards. Every TV they get has to be bigger than the last one, blah, blah, blah. The trouble with all this is they become a debt slave, and they could very easily not upgrade their car that's only 3 years old right now and just continue to drive it for another 7 to 10 years. But no, they don't want to. There's ones that have got to live in an area that they basically can barely afford to live in, and rent-wise and stuff like that, or even mortgage-wise. And they feel that if they take 1 inch of a step backwards, if they skimp on something, if they drop their living standards a bit, they go and install a wood heater instead of, having a convenient one that's turned on with a remote control. They're going to somehow be a failure. But what they don't realise is they're failing themselves by digging themselves deeper into debt and by being absolutely dependent on their income never going down. And they want things to get better, but they want things to be better right now. It's part of the instant gratification mentality that is also prevalent amongst city yuppies and stuff like that. And I've heard a preacher talking about, the instant gratification mentality being a bad thing because, it's a lack of, it's a virtue to have patience, and the Bible talks a bit about patience and all that. But quite simply, they can't go hard for a while, and have to buy the generic brand of biscuits to be able to save themselves from going bankrupt. And some of them will not take 1 inch of a step backwards, do drive themselves into bankruptcy. The wife walks off with the kids and half of it, and then they end up committing suicide. And it's just bloody pathetic. I think that, some people, they want to get ahead, but they're so set in this instant gratification mentality that they can't skimp out, they can't live on the cheap for a while in order to restore their financial situation, alleviate debt, and allow themselves to have a life that is a lot more relaxed. And life isn't all about money. But the trouble is, if you can't take 1 drop of living standards, if you can't have 1 drop of income, you're a slave to your job for the rest of your life. And here I am, I've been unemployed now for more than a month. And I've still got plenty of money. I really haven't had a drop in living standards, and to be quite honest, I don't feel that I've got much worse living standards than anyone else. Maybe 95% what everybody else has got. Hell, I'm still on the internet talking to you now. But that sort of thing, don't wipe yourself out over never being willing to drop your standard of living in order to be able to set yourself free financially.